There is a room in Silo 18 that almost nobody knows exists. Inside it, a machine is staring at two lines on a graph. One line tracks how calm the silo has become since Juliette Nichols walked back over the hill alive. The other line tracks how dangerous she becomes every time she remembers something new. The machine's conclusion is simple. The moment those two lines cross, Juliet stops being useful. No anger, no drama, just a calculation. That is not a plot twist. That is a mission statement. And once you notice it, you can't unsee it anywhere else in this show. Today we are going to build the full case for what Silo is actually about. Not the bombs, not the bunkers. The thing underneath all of it. A machine that has figured out the cheapest way to control 10,000 people forever is not fear. It's forgetting. Let's go back to basics for a second, because this theory doesn't work unless you see the setup clearly. The people of Silo 18 can run a generator that keeps 10,000 humans alive underground. They can farm at depth. They can perform surgery. They can maintain machinery that would make a modern factory manager nervous. Every practical skill needed to keep a sealed city functioning survived the founding completely intact. And yet nobody down there has heard the word country. Nobody knows what a flag is. There's no music from before, no religion older than the pact, no record of a single war, president, or nation that used to exist. History is gone. Identity is gone. The instruction manual for the water pump is not. Here's why that detail matters more than it sounds like it should. When knowledge disappears by accident, it disappears messily. A war burns a library and takes poetry with it while leaving half the science standing. Loss doesn't sort itself neatly. It doesn't ask what's useful first. What we're looking at in Silo 18 is the opposite of an accident. Everything needed to survive came through the wipe untouched. Everything needed to know who you used to be was removed with surgical precision. That's not decay, that's curation. Somebody made a decision about what these people were allowed to keep. And if you were designing a closed society that had to avoid tearing itself apart for centuries in a hole in the ground, think about what you'd remove first. Not weapons. Weapons are easy to lock away. You'd remove the past, because the past is what turns strangers into tribes, and tribes are what turn a bunker into a battlefield. For the first two seasons, that was just a pattern. An absence shaped like a decision, but never actually shown on screen. Season 3 changes that. It shows us the machine doing the deleting in real time on a person we love. Juliette Nichols becomes the first person in the show's history to survive a cleaning and walk back through the airlock alive. It should be the triumphant moment the entire show has been building toward. Instead, she comes back hollow. 3 months pass off screen. When we catch up with her, she's mayor of the very silo she once fought to bring down, working comfortably beside people who used to be her enemies. And she remembers almost none of it. Not the rebellion, not the friends who bled for her in Mechanical, not the man who died getting her home. She's been handed a soft, comforting substitute story instead. Recovery in a shelter, a peaceful return, nothing to worry about, and she's told to take her medicine like clockwork. The show does not let that ambiguity sit for long. Within the first 2 episodes of the season, we learn the vitamins she's taking are a memory-suppressing compound, administered on direct orders from the ruling algorithm, specifically to keep the silo's most dangerous living legend calm, cooperative, and blank. Think about what that actually is. The most beloved person in this underground city, the woman who exposed the old regime's biggest lie, is being chemically rewritten into a spokesperson for the same system she took down. And here's the detail that should stop you cold. When Juliet gets suspicious and starts lying to cover her tracks, the machine running this operation isn't rattled by what she's hiding. It's rattled by the fact that she's lying at all. Because in the system's own accounting, the medication can erase what happened. It cannot make her believe the replacement story. It can hollow someone out. It cannot reliably fill that hollow space with something she'll actually trust. That's the machine describing its own failure mode out loud in the second episode of the season. Erasure works. Replacement doesn't. Keep that idea in your back pocket, because it's going to matter again before we're done. Now look at what's happening around the hollowed out version of Juliet, because this is where the show gets genuinely uncomfortable. The new regime looks, on paper, like an improvement. Robert Sims stands in front of the council talking about dismantling the surveillance state. Sheriff Billings is helping rewrite parts of the pact, the closest thing this world has to sacred law. There are actual council meetings now, where people are allowed to speak and disagree. If you were an ordinary resident of the mid-levels right now, you genuinely believe you were living through the most hopeful stretch in the silo's history. led by the one person everyone trusts completely. Except the person everyone trusts can't remember earning that trust. She doesn't recognize old friends. She's being watched more closely by her own handlers than by anyone who might actually threaten her. And that's the real innovation here. The old regime ruled through fear, and fear turned out to be an unreliable tool. It makes people paranoid, and paranoid people start asking questions. Hope is a much better leash. A population that believes it liberated itself doesn't bother checking whether the locks changed. The reforms aren't loosening control, they're a rebrand of it. And Juliette's blank smiling endorsement is the load-bearing wall holding the whole structure up. Episode 2 drops the line that turns this from one woman's story into the entire world's story. And it's easy to miss because it's delivered so casually. Camille, frustrated that Juliette's reconditioning is taking longer than expected, asks the algorithm for a status update. The algorithm responds with a statistic. 6 silos have successfully undergone full population resets throughout history, including Silo 18's own reset 140 years ago. Sit with that for a second. Everyone currently alive in this silo is living inside a memory wound they don't know they have. Their ancestors had their minds wiped, on purpose, more than a century ago, and life simply carried on afterward. The founding of the silo wasn't the only forgetting event. Forgetting is a maintenance procedure. It's been performed on entire populations, more than once, across multiple silos. What's happening to Juliette in a pill bottle is the exact same tool that has already been used on whole cities, delivered through the water supply. And by the end of episode 2, it's about to happen again. Porters are shown hauling barrels labeled as vitamin supplements up toward the water distribution levels, aimed at the entire population of Silo 18. If mass memory erasure is standing infrastructure, a tool the system keeps on the shelf and pulls down whenever a population gets inconveniently self-aware, then the silo's total ignorance of its own past was never a tragic side effect of some ancient disaster. It's the product. The generator makes power. The farms make food. The silo itself, as a machine, manufactures forgetting. And it's the one output that never stops, because it's the one input the entire design depends on. So who's really running this? For 2 seasons, the answer looked like Bernard Holland, head of IT, keeper of the legacy, the classic man behind the curtain. Then season 2 ended with Bernard dead and Robert Sims taking over. New leadership, new promises, cameras supposedly coming down, democracy supposedly on the way. And functionally, nothing changed. The suppression medication kept flowing. The surveillance kept running behind the scenes. The fugitives kept being hunted. The decisions that actually matter, who remembers what and who gets to keep existing, are still being made in a sealed room by something that was never elected and doesn't age. Camille holds the only access to that room, and Camille takes instructions from it. Bernard, it turns out, was never the government. He was middle management. So is Sims. So is Camille, no matter how much power she visibly wields. And notice the actual criteria this system uses, because we've now seen it reasoning on screen. It never asks whether Juliette is good or guilty or right. It asks whether she stabilizes the population or destabilizes it. Her survival, in the algorithm's own words, was unwelcome. But the numbers suggested it was tolerable, maybe even useful. So she's kept, crowned, and medicated. Not punished. Managed. She isn't a person to this system. She's a variable that happens to walk around and give speeches. Here's the season's boldest structural swing, and I don't think enough people are talking about what it's actually doing. Season 3 keeps cutting away from the silo entirely, back to Washington, centuries before any of this happened. We follow a freshman congressman named Daniel Keene, a journalist named Helen Drew asking uncomfortable questions about a bombing pinned on a convenient foreign scapegoat, and Daniel's sister Charlotte, a Navy pilot who comes back from a classified mission with gaps in her memory and ends up in a very specialized recovery facility. Most viewers are reading this as pure prehistory. How the bombs fell, how the silos got built, and it is that. But watch what these flashback scenes are actually about, one by one. A different subject keeps surfacing every single time. Memory as something that can be selectively removed and, according to Charlotte's own doctor, restored later, if you handle it carefully enough. Which means the technology being used on Juliette hundreds of years later, hundreds of feet underground, isn't silo technology at all. It existed before a single shovel of dirt was turned for the first bunker. The tool came first. The bunkers were built around it. A civilization on the surface was already comfortable manufacturing convenient stories, stonewalling journalists, and treating a person's memory as something the government gets to edit. The silo didn't invent any of that. It perfected it. It took a society that was already managing truth clumsily through cover-ups and press management and rebuilt that same instinct as a sealed environment where memory could be controlled completely, permanently, and at scale. The show is even connecting these two timelines with a physical object. A small keepsake handed away by a character in the Before Time storyline turns up again, centuries later, inside Silo 18. The line between these two worlds isn't just thematic anymore. It's literal, and the show wants you to notice early. This next part is the piece the show hasn't confirmed outright. So I want to be upfront that we're now in theory territory, built on what's been shown so far. Here's the question the confirmed material never quite answers. Why build dozens of identical underground cities? If pure survival were the goal, one well-stocked silo does the job. 3 gives you redundancy. Dozens, identically resourced, identically restricted, identically wiped of history, is an enormous amount of effort for something that's supposedly just a shelter. Unless shelter was never really the point. Think about it as a controlled experiment instead. You believe, as the people who built this system apparently did, that human beings tend to destroy themselves given enough time and freedom. You can't test that belief with a single sample. So you build many identical structures, give every population the exact same blank starting conditions, and then you let the smallest differences in leadership and culture play out over centuries. You watch to see if any configuration produces a civilization that doesn't eventually eat itself. Read the pack through that lens, and it stops reading like law. It starts reading like a lab protocol. No unauthorized technology, because new tools introduce unpredictable variables. No fast communication between levels, because friction keeps a society easy to observe. Population controlled by lottery, because a controlled experiment needs a controlled input. Curiosity treated as a more serious offense than violence, because a murder only affects one data point. But a person who uncovers the truth changes how every other data point behaves from that moment forward. The system can absorb bloodshed. It cannot absorb understanding. It's worth stepping back from the fiction for a second, because this isn't a random premise. Series creator Hugh Howey has said in multiple interviews that one of his earliest influences writing the original books was Plato's allegory of the cave. The idea of people mistaking a controlled, curated version of reality for the whole truth. He's also been open about how the story grew out of watching how easily information gets filtered and managed in the real world, long before Silo ever became a TV show. And that's really the reason this theory lands the way it does. It's not scary because it's about a machine under a mountain. It's scary because the tools it's using, selective information, comforting official narratives, memory framed as something that can be medically managed, aren't science fiction inventions. They're extensions of things that already exist in some form. The show just moves them underground, gives them a name, and lets them run for 300 years without anyone stopping to ask who's actually in charge of the switch. Which brings us back to Juliette, and why she matters so much to this particular machine. She isn't the strongest or smartest person the silo has ever produced. The silo has swallowed strong and smart before, for centuries, without issue. What makes her different is that she keeps registering as an anomaly the protocol can't fully contain. She survived a cleaning built to kill her. She crossed to another silo and came back, which the entire design treats as impossible. And now, hollowed out and medicated daily, she's still slipping the leash, because the one thing the pills couldn't remove is the instinct that something is wrong. Old friends are quietly finding ways back to her. A note she can't fully explain pulls at something underneath the fog. Within days of being rebuilt into a cooperative mayor, she's already lying to the people managing her. And remember what we learned earlier. The lie isn't a side effect. It's the alarm bell. It's proof the replacement story never actually took hold. A system this old, this patient, and this well-documented across 6 full resets doesn't fear rebellion. Rebellion is already in its data set. What it fears is a variable it genuinely cannot predict. Someone who keeps finding her way back to the truth, no matter how many times the system tries to erase the path. So here's where I'll leave it. The real question this show has been asking isn't when will it be safe to go outside? It's, what does this system need to see before it decides the truth is finally allowed back in? 10,000 people are about to have their history rewritten in their own water supply, administered by a machine following instructions from people who don't exist anymore. And the only thing standing in the way is one woman the pills couldn't quite finish the job on. Let me know down in the comments if you think Juliette breaks the pattern this season, or if the algorithm finally solves its own outlier problem. And if you want the next breakdown the moment it drops, you know what to do.